Hey guys, Youngblood with you for another Picking the Right Ship video, this time looking at picking the right ship to run bunkers with. If you're unfamiliar with this gameplay loop or just not really sure what I mean by it, I'm basically talking about taking missions that take you to bunkers that are typically underground, where you may or may not have to deal with turrets that are trying to stop your arrival, and then you have to do battle with crews underground, and you are ideally coming away with loot, boxes, or other items. Now, we're only going to be looking at ships that are out and that you can do this with today, so ships that could be awesome but are in the concept phase, we're excluding from this list. To understand what it takes to do this job, if there's turrets specifically, you're going to need a few this or that requirements that aren't really hard requirements, but are really strong advantage points. First off, you either have to be able to be nimble enough to avoid taking damage from the turrets, which there can be multiple of, and atmospheric flight model will play a role in this, or you have to be big enough, really durable enough is really what we're saying, that you can just tank the damage while you destroy the turrets that are trying to kill you. Bunkers can be easy, because not all bunkers are hostile missions. So if you know what you're looking for and you simply just choose the right types of missions, you may not have to worry about the damage aspect of all of this. But if you want to be able to do all bunker missions, then this is super relevant. Now, speaking of flight model, having the VTOL toggle is a nice addition, as well as the conditions are going to be varying from planet to moon to moon to planet. Typically, running bunkers is a back-to-back-to-back activity. So you're now wanting to have enough storage for multiple people in your crew to be able to store items without needing to be able to drop your goods off back at a station and clear out that personal inventory. For most ships, the capacity is high enough that this isn't going to be a real big issue. But more is better, especially as your crew size climbs. I also like ships that have an option for ground vehicles, especially if you're not in the big enough to tank damage category, but you do run into that bunker that has 4 to 5 turrets. Being able to drive in and not be engaged after parking in a safe spot and not running for an hour on foot is a way better approach. Weapons racks on the interior are a nice perk as well, so your crew can quickly drop collected goods and pick weapons preferred from the bunker, and basically get ready to egress is a nice addition. And finally, having a medical bay is a really, really nice perk, though not a hard requirement by any means. So now we get into my favorites for this, and we'll start off with what I would probably say is the front runner in all of these ships, being the cheap, small, but incredibly valuable C8R Rescue Pisces. First off, if the bunker is hostile, you're not going to be tanking damage or destroying a lot of turrets. It's a snub ship. However, it is small and agile enough, and it flies relatively well in atmosphere that you can easily hug the ground terrain and avoid a lot of the oncoming fire that's coming your way. It's small enough that you can actually get pretty close to the bunker without worrying about the turrets. In this ship, though, you have room for a few players, you have decent internal storage, and most importantly, you have what is a Tier 3 medical bed on board, which isn't enough to solve the bigger problems a player has in the medical category, but it is enough to keep people on their feet for a bit while streaming missions back to back, or to keep the severe injuries at bay while you get them to a hospital. Your approach using the C8R in a friendly bunker is really simple. Just tuck in wherever you want, load up your gear, go down, come back with the goods, or whenever you need to get patched up, and then go back down and repeat. For bonus points, it is small enough that if you tuck between buildings, you may not be noticed on a visual scan, though ship scanners are going to find you most of the time, even when powered down, but you're not going to stand out quite as much as some of the bigger ships. Being a small ship, it has a size 1 quantum drive, so you will be, you're not going to be bouncing back and forth between planets a ton before you need to refuel. And it is worth noting that the bigger systems like Pyro are not going to be friendly to small ships that have to move around a lot and have less room for fuel. So future-proof yourself a little bit, or just really know where you plan to succeed once the game expands. At around 65 bucks, the C8R is impossible to ignore for this list. Up next is basically the next tier up on this list in the medical gameplay world, and now we're talking about the Cutlass Red. The Cutty Red has been a favorite of mine for bunker missions for a long time now, and part of that was due to the bed on board originally allowed you to do respawns. If you died in the bunker, you could respawn back on your ship and you could just rinse and repeat. But now the Red has Tier 3 medical beds as well, with no plans to increase that to respawn sizing. So the Red isn't going to serve the force multiplier option of keeping your people on site even after dying that it did before. That being said, you have the size 2 quantum drives and tanks, meaning you have pretty good range and speed if you pick the right drive, so you can zip around where you do want to go. It also has some decent weaponry on board, allowing you to engage hostile targets that may be at the bunker you want to be at, and turrets, while it is a hell of a lot more durable than the C8R is. It isn't as nimble, so turrets can be a problem if you're not sure how to really deal or contend with those. And smaller fighter pilots are going to be more challenging in atmosphere in a Cuddy Red, just because it doesn't handle that as well. Now, a good pilot can take down all of the turrets and land, but it doesn't have a huge profile either. So even those that can't kill the turrets should at least be able to find a place where it can set down kind of behind like a ridge or something, because that front profile is pretty skinny. And with the storage space on board that's big enough to fit a ground vehicle like the STV, something that's not going to attract turret fire, you have an option to get in quicker than you would on foot. The Red also has a large crew carrying ability. You have 2 medical beds on board for anybody that would need it, and plenty of personal storage on board for everyone to store their collected goods. And then, again, we talked about it not being real nimble or agile, but it does have VTOL thrusters for when the conditions on the atmosphere are pretty sketchy, to help keep you stable and get up and down effectively. Overall, the Red is an awesome ship for this gameplay, especially with just being able to bring along more people than the C8R can sustain. Now, going small again, I want to call out the 100 series from Origin. It's not perfect, it's not designed for this role, but I'm sure the other two weren't really designed for this either. The 100s, though, they're fast, they're small, they're agile, they're easy and quick to get on and off the ground. They have an easy and fast way to get in and out of the ship. There's room for cargo boxes and are easy to hide from turrets. You do lack some medical facilities and you'll have a hard time with turrets, but if the game is to hide and land, you can do it easily. They also have the fuel scoops, that air system for refueling your hydrogen, so you won't have to top off the ship real often, which is really nice. And if you have one already, or were thinking about picking one up for another reason, then this is a ship that works really well in these situations. It doesn't have room for ground vehicles, it doesn't have a medical bay, it doesn't even have that large of an internal storage. But for a single player running bounties, it's worth the look if you don't have another option on this list, but you already own a 100. I wouldn't pick one up for the purpose of doing bunkers, because there's other ships that I think do it better, but it is a fine alternative purpose if you already have it. Another ship that I think has a pretty good place on this list would be the Freelancer series. They're all relatively tough to be able to tank some fire, but have room for crew that go up to 4 having seats in the bridge, plus a turret bed logout ability for 4 people, decent weaponry, and depending on the model that you select, you can have impressive cargo ability as well. The Freelancers do not have great flight models, and they are even worse in atmosphere. So if you end up in a dogfight before landing, this is not the ideal ship. It also has poor visibility with that mail slot style cockpit, meaning that everything, seeing everything without dropping to third person can be a little bit challenging when you're trying to land, and a lot of bunkers have weird things that can get in your way when you're trying to set down. The reason that I say depending on the variant that you decide on is because they all have value to some degree that may push you in one direction or the other depending on what you may want to do or how you tend to play. Though I would say that the base Freelancer model isn't in consideration. It does fine, the other 3 just do it better. So, if your intention is to bounce all over the systems and string together these missions and you don't want to have to stop to refuel real often, the range on the Freelancer DUR is one of the best in the game. You do lose a little bit of the internal cargo space, but you still have enough room in the rear for smaller ground vehicles like a Dragonfly, a PTV, an STV, a Rock, etc. Fitting a larger vehicle like an Ursa or a Cyclone is a no-go, but you're not without transportation options. After the DUR, if you don't mind refuel stops, then I much prefer the Freelancer Max, because it shares basically the same flight model while having a cavernous cargo area, allowing you to bring all of the aforementioned vehicles, but adds capability for a few Cyclones, the Ursa, the Lynx. So now you have the ability to land outside of harm if there are turrets and drive in safely with your whole crew in one vehicle. If you like flexibility in how you're going to engage and the types of targets you're going to take on, the Max is probably my favorite option of the Freelancers. The last call out would be the Freelancer Miss, which is a missile boat variety. which shares many of the same qualities of the DUR, like flight model, crew, and vehicle capacity, but it does lose out on the extra range that comes from the fuel tanks that the DUR has. But it gains a bunch of missiles. And the reason to call that out is because the missiles, depending on the patch that you're playing with, missiles can be really good and a quick way to destroy turrets. And while they're not free, they're not really that expensive either, meaning that you can easily take down the threats at a hostile bunker, allowing you to head down into the internals of the bunker without a lot of conflict. Again, I think my preferred freelancer for this role is the Max, but the Miss and the DUR both have value depending on how you intend to play. After this one, we're moving into the Anvil Valkyrie, which is actually just one of my favorite ships in the game. The Valkyrie is a dedicated dropship that has a capacity for about 20 armored troops held in drop seats, meaning that you can basically bring as many people as you would like to the fight or the raid. If you have a large group, this is very convenient, but it does run the risk that if someone decides to pick a fight, you may lose your entire crew in one fell swoop. That being said, the Valkyrie is well armored and shielded, has a lot of player-controlled weapons on turrets, so it's not an easy ship to take down quickly. The flight model of the Valkyrie, it's not fast, it's not real agile, but it is controllable and has VTOL, allowing you to take touchdown and take off easily and be very stable without a whole lot of fighting the weather. The Valkyrie also has a ton of personal storage and weapon racks for storing goods found in bunkers, as well as an impressive vehicle capacity, allowing you to bring along several rovers to transport your troops to wherever they need to go, and to facilitate the loading of items and hauling back to the ship if you park at a distance. It also has the side doors that kind of open like on the Cutlass Black, meaning that even if it is a hostile situation, you can get your players out relatively easily and allow you to take off and fly if you need to. Overall, aside from agility, the Valkyrie has a lot of what you would be asking for in this role and is one of my most preferred ships in the game, but for this job specifically, I think it does a really nice job. Now, there's two other ships on this list that I'm going to call out that border on the cheesy because they can be somewhat easy mode, but they do the job well. The first of which is the Carrack, which is a legit option. But with its large shields and good armor, you can basically just land and let the turrets fire on you, and well, you just basically casually allow your own turrets to take them out. Now, your shields aren't going to help you to get underground, so the medical bay on the Carrack is what's going to serve as a mobile respawn point. So if you die underground, you can come back on the Carrack and try again down below easily. If you don't die, you can take advantage of the healing factors once you get back on board the ship with the mission complete, ready to go to the next stop. It is worth calling out that the Carrack isn't a dedicated medical ship, so it is uncertain if it's going to keep the respawn ability long term, but for now, it works. You have a large ramp to carry rovers if you want them, and more storage than you'll know what to do with. Overall, the Carrack is really good at this job. It's most of the time bigger than most of the bunkers that you're landing out. It's arguably the best ship to do this job, but it can tend to be a little bit overkill. The one that really is a little cheesy, but also kind of purpose-built for an assault is the A2, which can, one, just drop a bomb and knock out all of the turrets immediately if they're there, or just competing players that are down there. That being said, though, that is overkill anyway, though admittedly fun, considering the under-facing turrets on the A2 make it incredibly well-suited to destroy ground targets if they're present anyway. In addition, if there's other ground threats, it's the one option on this list that's capable of bringing a tank along to the battle, and it's about as tough as these ships get. It has a massive storage. Honestly, any of the Herculeses will do the job, but the A2 can do it with a little additional flair that the others don't offer. I think for me, when it comes to picking the right option, the C8R is my favorite smaller option, with the Valkyrie being next up for a larger group, but again, it depends on how you plan to play it, and the type of target, and the amount of travel you intend to do. There's just going to be some ships that work better than others, and you're going to have your own personal preferences. So if there's other ships that you guys like using for this task, leave them in the comments. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more. Have yourselves a wonderful day, and take care.